Hello everyone, and welcome back to another whiteboard video. Today, we're going to be answering the question, should you wear a lifting belt when you're lifting? Now, to answer that question, we need to actually understand what a belt does and how it works. And then once we understand what it does and how it works, then we can basically just ask ourselves, well, what would be the application of that and who might that be better or not as good for? So here's a rough diagram of what is supposed to be a rib cage and a pelvis. All right, so imagine that this diagram here is me, I'm facing this way, here's rib cage, here is pelvis. In a sort of resting position, okay, your guts, your organs, internal organs, they kind of sit like toward the bottom of the rib cage. Obviously there are some higher, some lower, okay, but that circle is meant to represent the guts. And basically what happens when you take a breath in is you have this muscle called your diaphragm, which many of you have heard of, which kind of sits like a dome shape like this. And what the diaphragm does is it pushes the guts down. So when you inhale, the diaphragm basically goes from a shape that's more like this, and it goes like this, it contracts downward, and it kind of ends up more flat like this. So from this dome shaped thing, it smushes the guts down, the guts go this way. And as the guts go this way and descend, that's why your belly, by the way, moves out when you inhale, which is a completely normal thing that you should expect. You're not breathing into your belly, you're breathing and then your guts are being pushed down by your diaphragm. So when your guts go down, oftentimes what happens is because you have this thing called the spine back there, is they also go forward, right? Okay, and what a lifting belt does is it constrains the space between the rib cage and the pelvis so that you don't have as much room to be able to move stuff. And if you understand pressure, basically what happens is when the volume of the space decreases or it's made more limited by a belt which is looped around this thing, the pressure increases for the same amount of stuff in that area. So basically what a belt is meant to do is it's meant to enhance the sort of pressure creating mechanisms that the diaphragm and the abdominals create. You can think about it like an additional layer of abdominal tissue that is helping you create stiffness in the trunk. Okay, so very simply, that's what a belt is meant to do. Now the question becomes, should you, the listener, use a lifting belt? Well, what does this really come down to? One word, 4 letters, comes down to the goal, okay? So imagine two kinds of people, one of which is on the extreme of trying to get as strong as humanly possible in the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. And the other is someone who's never resistance trained, who is trying to learn how to do a deadlift for the first time. Intuitively, you probably already have some answer that says, well, that's obvious. The power lifter who's trying to be as strong as they can probably should wear the belt, whereas the person who's new to lifting may or may not need the belt, or definitely wouldn't need the belt, right? But you might not recommend the belt to that person for a variety of reasons, right? For example, in the deadlift in particular, maybe it's uncomfortable for them and it's too many things to focus on. We don't really care too much about like how perfect their brace is, right? We're not trying to get this person to pull their max on day one, at least hopefully not. So clearly there are these different extremes, and then there are many different situations between those extremes. What I like to break this down to is, does the belt create a situation in your exercise selection that makes it more specific or easier to accomplish your goal, right? So perhaps a situation in the middle of, let's say, the power lifter and the person who's just starting to train is a situation wherein you're, let's say, doing a set of heavy hack squats. And what you find is that obviously your legs are the rate limiter. It's pretty much impossible for your trunk to be a rate limiter in something like a hack squat or a leg press. But what you may find is the additional use of a belt may make it easier on your trunk, and proportionately it may make it easier for you to, let's say, maintain your brace, which may in turn make it easier for you to be more specific, more precise, more focused on just the legs and driving through the legs into the platform, right? Whereas in another instance, let's say you're doing a pendulum squat, or let's say you're doing like a leg extension. Those two are obviously very different, but like no one like gets down on a leg extension and says, hey, I think this performance would be improved if I wear a lifting belt. And many people, when they get into a pendulum squat, they feel pretty much all the tension in their quads almost immediately, or their glutes almost immediately, where it's kind of this in between the hack squat and the leg extension, where, some people could, use the belt and benefit from it. Some people don't really care or don't even notice. So what it ultimately comes down to is, does using the belt and its mechanism of increasing stiffness in the trunk, increasing your ability to basically not bend over at the trunk in a variety of different ways, does that actually serve the goal of the exercise? Because if it doesn't, then a belt isn't necessary. If it does, it would be helpful to use a belt. Where I think people get a little bit too extreme with either side of this conversation is either the side of people that say you should always wear a belt because it's gonna basically reduce your back pain or prevent injury, which is not true. And the other side of the camp basically says, well, if you use a belt, you might become reliant on it and you might start using it across every exercise, and that's a bad thing. And then you ask, well, why might that reliance be bad? Like, why is the reliance on the belt a bad thing? And you're oftentimes met with answers that are totally vague or just scientifically unsupported, at least insofar as the current research can substantiate. So again, just understand, this is the mechanism, this is what it does, it is neither good nor bad, and ask yourself, what is my goal, and let me work backward from the goal. If you can benefit from the belt because it's helping you in the motion that you're doing, great, use the belt, no problem. If the belt has nothing to do with the goal, i.e., you're doing biceps curls or triceps extensions or leg extensions, right? The list goes on. Then it's probably unnecessary to wear a belt, and you might just look a little bit silly walking around, as like one of those dudes who's wearing the belt doing curls in the gym. But hey, if you like it and it makes you look cool and feel good, doesn't seem to be too much of a problem. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions about bracing, click the link in the description. Join my free online community, no credit card or nothing required. You can go into the community. We have a whole form section just for questions that everyone in the community plus me can answer. So I hope to see you there. Are you someone that wants to be able to target any muscle in your body when you're lifting, but you also don't give a shit about complicated anatomy and biomechanics? If you are, then this is the perfect ebook for you. The Target Any Muscle ebook is not really an ebook. It's more like a lifetime cheat sheet guide to lifting. You need a total of zero understanding of anatomy and biomechanics to understand this material. And that's because every chapter is full of tons of different diagrams and very visual, simple explanations about how to set up an exercise for any muscle. In addition, every chapter functions as a standalone guide, so you can simply click on the table of contents and navigate to any muscle group that you're training on any given day. Every single chapter includes visuals of how to stretch any muscle, how to shorten any muscle, how to load any muscle, and then how to stabilize your body so that you can train that muscle appropriately. And in addition, at the end of every chapter, there's a training FAQ to address commonly asked questions and a full video lecture summarizing each chapter with me and my skeleton model to demonstrate. This is meant to function as a cheat sheet for life. This should be the last product that you ever purchase about how to lift. I hope you all enjoy the guide. Happy gains.